I've just started recording, Colleen, but I just wanted to check and be sure that you're okay with being recorded.
Oh, of course.
Okay. I am going to light the chalice, and I have a little poem to read.
Okay.
But I figured out how to do this. She says, well, we're not going to light the chalice. But I still am going to read this poem, which is called Welcome Morning. It's by Anne Sexton. There is joy in all, in the hair I brush each morning, in the cannon towel newly washed, that I rub my body with each morning, in the chapel of eggs I cook each morning, in the outcry from the kettle that heats my coffee each morning, in the spoon and the chair that cry, hello there, Anne, each morning, in the Godhead of the table that I set my silver plate cup upon each morning. All this is God, right here in my pea green house each morning. And I mean, though often forget, to give thanks, to faint down by the kitchen table in a prayer of rejoicing at the holy birds at the kitchen window, as the holy birds at the kitchen window peck into their marriage of seeds. So while I think of it, let me paint a thank you on my palm for this God, this laughter of the morning, lest it go unspoken. The joy that isn't shared, I've heard, dies young. So Colleen, I invite you to share your joy with us, and I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join us in this way. And I have to apologize that I have an awful time fitting a lot of different thoughts into the time. It seems to go so fast that I took a whole time the other week to get us through the first part of my life. And I'm going to show you the picture. Started with this. Can you see it? Yes?
Yes.
And went through my first 20 years, which ended up with my having finished college and landed from having grown up and spent my first 20 years in a small town in central Texas. I then take the next, I think, 11 years in Connecticut. By the time I had finished college, I'd gone through the long years of the Depression and the war, and had never really been very far away. So I wanted to go somewhere else and took this job after I finished college in Connecticut. So the next 11 years of my life actually are in Connecticut, and a lot happens to me there. I do want to just quickly read the places I lived in Connecticut, because I know different people know some of these different places as I go across the country. In Connecticut, I lived in Hartford, New Britain, Darien, Coventry, Eastford, Putnam. All of these years, I should mention, I had no acquaintance with the Unitarian Church. Never heard of it, actually. And this was true for my husband, who I want to tell you was Bob Hurst. But I always called him Robin because we knew too many boys at the USO that were named Bob and Robert and so forth. So he was always Robin for me. But he also had never heard of the Unitarian Church. So after about a number of years in Connecticut, Bob had come back from the Army, gone through college, gotten into teaching, and that's why we were moving around Connecticut. And we also then have, in those years, 2 little girls who joined our family, Emily and her older sister, Bryn. And we actually were Episcopalians at the time, but we were having a lot of problems with it. We couldn't even sing in church and sing the hymns without leaving words out. And so Bob was talking to the minister about it, Dr. Love, and he said, you know, you're not Episcopalians, you're Unitarians. And Bob said, what the heck is that? So that was our introduction to the Unitarian Church. This was in one of the smaller towns in Hartford, in Connecticut. So we were very fortunate to actually have come about not too far from us, and we were in rather the rural part of the state, a gathering of people who were interested in forming a Unitarian fellowship there. So we were able to join that, and that was our introduction to Unitarianism. And we have never strayed since that day. So Dr. Love was right. We have one thing I want to mention. It was really interesting living in Connecticut to absorb the New England history that was so saturated everywhere we went, particularly in the smaller towns where we lived while Bob was teaching, and the Coventry, where we lived at one time. We lived in the home of Gideon Wells. I'm sure you don't remember his name, but he was Lincoln's Secretary of the Navy. And this was his home in this lovely small town of Coventry. We lived on the second floor, and his family lived on the first floor. Down the road from that, and this is what history was just all around you, was the home of, what I want to say, who is it that said, I regret I can't give but one life for my country?
John Paul Jones?
No.
No.
Nathan Hale. The home of Nathan Hale. I hope you remember him still. And just many of the things of interest that have just lasted through the years the way they always had been. So it was a wonderful education in New England life. When, however, we reached about 11 years, we'd been there, Bob had an offer to move to California to teach in one of the schools there, because California was having a lot of people move out there and everything was going on in California. And so we decided to move. And we've now found ourselves in 1958, in Colton, California. Well, I want to tell you where we lived in California. We lived in Colton a year. We were then the next year in Riverside, California, where Bob was teaching, both of those places. Then he got an offer to change his job entirely. And we moved from Riverside to La Jolla, if you're familiar with that, just above San Diego in California. And there he started a whole new career. It was with General Dynamics, which I'm sure you probably heard of over the years. And his new profession was in ergonomics, which was just developing. And his background was in his graduate studies in psychology, measurements and all that stuff. And there we actually bought a new house, but only lived there for a little over a year while he worked on what was to be the Atlas intercontinental ballistic missile. And when they reached the point where the missile was ready to go, it was to be tested up the coast at Vandenberg, off of Vandenberg Air Force Base on the coast of California. And we moved up to Santa Maria, which was an interesting, smaller town, but mainly close to all this that was going on out at the base. So I was working on finishing off the big missile, and so I've had some interesting things going on. I took a Japanese course, but this was a center for Japanese Americans. And I took a course in their, whatchamacallit, flower arranging. And I actually won a prize at the county fair. So that was fun. We also had some wonderful pets. And then what would happen? Bob would be working on the missile out on the coastline. So he would telephone me and he would say, go out on the porch. And I'd go out on the porch and look toward the coast. And then I would see, let me get this thing up. Yes. Now, can you see that?
Yes.
Down. It's I'm too far away.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't see it myself. Not a very good picture. Can you see the top of it?
Bring it down. There we go. Okay. Yep.
Now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that is, you take it. That is the Atlas intercontinental ballistic missile. And it was really something to see. So they would be testing one, or the same one. I don't know how they did that. Oh gosh, it went on for weeks. And so that was something to step out and see. You know, the world was changing in those days. We just were moving into the new world. So the other thing that happened there, besides the girls going to school, was we acquired a third member of the family, and our son Lee was born there. 6 months later, the whole project there was finished with the Atlas. And Bob was offered, that was the end there. So Bob was offered a chance to go with General Dynamics to a new job, which happened to be in Fort Worth, Texas. And we had been in California about 6 years. So moving to Texas was fun for us, actually. The girls were in school, and so we moved back to Fort Worth. Let's see if I would have
1962.
Yeah, no, back to Fort Worth in '63, and we're there until '72, which was, you know, a good 10 years. He was with General Dynamics in Fort Worth, working on the first swing wing airplane. And So we were able to connect with the church, with the Unitarian Church. We had been everywhere we went before when we could, but Fort Worth had a fairly lively small Unitarian group. And by this time, the girls were getting into high school. They were in the LRY and met friends there. Um, and Bob was busy as could be. And I got into a lot of things. I had, one time I picketed for days a grocery store because of the farm workers' strikes in the western states, that they were pushing to get fair wages and so forth for farm workers. So I picketed grocery stores. And this came through connections with the church, because we had a visiting speaker who had come was one of those workers. The another thing I got into was, actually the zoo. Where we lived was just up the hillside from a lovely zoo in Fort Worth, but they did have some problems. And I started to look into it along with some friends of mine who were also in the church. And we found that the zoo's board members, who took free trips to Africa to select new animals, while 2 giraffes suffered broken legs from falls in their own neglected zoo grounds. And this was not just their problem throughout the zoo. It seemed like the money went to support the board more than it did to support the animals, and really thought this was bad. So I arranged to be able to speak at one of the the zoo is owned by the town, the city. And I spoke at one of the city's meetings and said that the board, actually, I had looked up all about them, that they were operating illegally. They hadn't bothered to get reelected as they were supposed to do according to their papers. And so we had quite an interesting time following that, but it was successful. And I was very pleased about that. So we had one experience in Fort Worth that, of course, I'll never forget. And it was that the Kennedys came to visit, and the President Kennedy, and stayed in Fort Worth at one of the hotels, and we had them on television watching them have breakfast early in the morning. And then they were going over to Dallas, because Dallas and Fort Worth are just 20 miles apart, and they were going over to Dallas to be in this big parade. Well, of course, you know what happened there. And we were so close to it, so involved, and it just was heartbreaking. And I, there's not much to say about it. It was heartbreaking for the whole country, and we were so close to it. Of course, I'll never forget that. Well, one little thing happened, I guess I will always remember, before we left Fort Worth. The house was struck by lightning, our house. And it was at night, and Bob happened to be out at a meeting. And we were having one of those electrical storms, which we have a lot of down there. And I was actually looked in the door of the kitchen, and I saw the walls and the whole kitchen just sheet up with the flames. And fortunately, there was a fire station within a block of where we lived. So I got them over there. They got over there really fast. We were able to save the house. And I told Bryn, run upstairs and get the baby, get him down, and Emily, go get the dog up there and bring him down. And they did. We were all quite safe. And I had to call Bob at the meeting and tell him, guess what? The house is on fire. But yes, that was a surprise. So we actually came through that pretty well and managed to go through the years until the General Dynamics project was finished and the plane was finished and they were closing things down. So then managed, it took a little while to get a job at Xerox. Well, for goodness sake, Xerox was the big thing in those days. The copying machine was like a miracle for us. And after we moved up here, for him to work at Xerox, we of course, I said, see if we can find a house near the church, because we always seem to be way off from wherever our church is. And sure enough, we ended up within, easily 6 blocks, if that, from the church, right down in Brighton. And it's been a wonderful place, and so fortunate to be that close to the church, because I have been very active. Bob was too. And I want to mention that Bob did die in 1905 after he had retired. And we had wonderful days, wonderful times together after his retirement. And together we became docents at Memorial Art Gallery. And I learned a lot about art and we enjoyed that very much. And then we also then got into what became the rest of my life. And it started in the church. A lot started in the church for me particularly. When we moved there, it was just the year after Reverend Dick Gilbert had come. And so I was sort of at loose ends, and I don't think I'd become historian yet, but I did serve for approximately 20 years as the historian for our church, along often with co-chairs. And so this was kind of early in the earlier years of Dick Gilbert's time and mine. And he asked me if I would look into something for him. And he said, look, we're going to dedicate the lounge as the Susan B. Anthony Lounge. And I think we might have some coverage from the newspaper. And I want to be sure. I really don't know, he said, how close she actually was to the church or what it meant to her. And I haven't seen anything about it. And could I please find out what the connection was? So sure, I'd love to. Well, I started trying to find something. And, I could not find anything. And it was so frustrating. I was reading her biographies. I was looking here, looking in our records. I couldn't really see her connection with the church. And so I stood there in the doorway of the lounge. And I just said out loud, I said, Miss Anthony, if you want me to find anything about this business of your connection with the church, you are going to have to help me. And she did. And I don't believe in this kind of stuff. But anyway, within about 3 days, I had a call from the U of R. Mary Huth, who was working in the U of R's special historical stuff, was working on the papers that our church had transferred to the U of R, which included much of the history of our church. And she was going through it, and she said, you know, I found this letter, and I think you really ought to have a copy of it back at the church. And so I'm going to send it to you, and it's from Susan B. Anthony. And so that's what it was. It's this wonderful letter that Miss Anthony wrote to be read, she said, by her sister Mary, loud and clear, because she wasn't able to be there for the dedication that she was missing. But she sent the letter, and the letter tells what First Unitarian Church meant to her in her life. And it's a letter of several pages. And it's just, who can ask for anything more? So this began my connection with the Susan B. Anthony House. I found that to be a wonderful part of my life, and I have had many privileges connected with it and wonderful experiences. I think we're getting on.
Oh, no. You're fine. About another 10 minutes
Well, okay.
or less.
Oh, yeah. So I have, through the church, I have some things here I wanted to show you. Had some wonderful experiences with the Anthony House then, which really connected with the church. And this is one. Can you see that? It's the statues in the little park over by the Anthony House. And if there's anyone in our group who has not seen the Anthony House, you really must do that. That is something that you mustn't miss. So in the park, by almost next to the Anthony House, is this statue with Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony sitting facing each other, which they did many, many times through their long, enduring friendship and work. And I had the privilege and the fun of, being on the board over at the house at the time it was proposed by, I can't say his name, that wonderful.
Pepsi.
What?
Pepsi.
Oh, Pepsi Kettervong, our sculptor, our local sculptor, who had the idea in the first place because he lived over there. And he said, nobody realizes what actually happened with Susan B. Anthony living here. And he said, she should be here so they can see her. And he came to the board over at the Anthony House and proposed this sculpture to be of Anthony and Douglas sitting, and he called it having tea, which he saw as a time of always a friendship, of reconciliation, of whatever good one might hope for was to have tea together. And so he proposed to our little group of the board sitting there this statue. And he said, and here would be Frederick Douglass, and here would be Miss Anthony. And I said, oh, Miss Anthony would never be sitting there like that. She's going to have to say, you don't know her. And so it was a wonderful experience to be called on then for all through this next year when he worked on those statues to be able to authenticate measurements and so forth from Miss Anthony. And I want to tell you that statue is accurate. When you see it, you're going to see her according to measurements. And also what should she be wearing, all this kind of thing. It was a wonderful experience that just dropped in my lap to consult on a statue like that. So you never know what things are going to turn up from the connections that you have. Then let me get over here a minute. So much goes on in the Rochester years, which actually, I don't know if I mentioned, we moved up here in 1972, which was the year after Dick Gilbert started. And so that is 49 years now. Well, being the historian at the church was, it just seemed to reach in so many different directions, because there was so much in the basement still. The way that the arrangement that we have with the U of R for our materials to be there, our historic materials to be kept and can be seen at the U of R, was that they would send back to us then, after they got all of our old material that we'd saved through years and years, and they sent back to us anything beyond all the copies. And a lot of things, people had been very careful to make like 3 copies of the program for this, and this and that and the other, the newsletter and so forth through the years. And it's really a great source of fun to find out what the heck they were doing for years back in there. And there were a lot of interesting things went on in this church that we don't ordinarily hear about. But so that was the way that we work with the U of R, and that we do have original materials still in our basement storage that we can use for displays and information. But of course, they're always open to us for the information that we have at the U of R too. One thing that, let me see what I had in mind besides that. There's so many different things. Oh, one thing I want to mention particularly, another experience I never expected to have that came out of our church, from our church, and that is, oh dear, something dropped off here.
I'll look at it.
Wait a minute. I got things mixed up here in my head. Oh, poor Emily can't get around here. Let her get back there.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Oh, in reading our history, I ran across something I had not known about, and that we have developed this wonderful play from, and that is about the 1848 meeting of the women's suffrage, first women's suffrage meeting, and they often called it the adjourned meeting from the one in Seneca Falls that 2 weeks later met in our church. And so we have the record written by the secretary about that, and nobody really thought about it or mentioned it. I was surprised to see about it. And so I thought, what we need is a plaque up on the wall down there where our church stood, and that the church was like across the street from City Hall, where City Hall is downtown now. And our church was located across the street, right next door to what used to be the big Presbyterian church down there. And it's something else now, but their church is still there. And I said, if we could just put a plaque up down there, then that would be something that would be there for people to recognize that this meeting took. Well, if you look on the wall in our entry place in our church, you'll see a copy of this plaque that that I did put up there. And I want to thank the church, actually paid for it finally, when I told them about it. And I do have some good pictures. It had a lovely dedication when we put it up. And it does, if you look at the copy on our wall, you'll see what it, I picked out what we could say on the plaque that came out of that meeting. And it does end with their declaration that they would work and encourage the acquisition of the vote for women, as well as everything else, but for women of every complexion. And this was a long time before that movement got started, but it did include women of all races. So I'm proud to have gotten that plaque up there. So lots of different, a lot of stuff happened, while I was being historian. And I almost always had a co-historian. I could ask somebody to serve with me, and it's more fun that way. But I had, I'm going to show you, one thing. Now see if you can see that. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So this is, excuse me, myself and Robin Bob Hurst together, standing at the doorway into the auditorium. And it was because we took on the celebration of our 75th year of anniversary for the church. It was the 75th anniversary year or something for the church. Well, we had all kinds of things going on during that year. And one of them was something we had discovered, and everybody sort of enjoyed it. And it was the cobblestone church out by oh dear, what's the well, out to the northwest of us
in Albion.
Yes, thank you very much. Did you ever get out there?
I have preached there. It's quite lovely.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so we discovered that the cobblestone church had been, I think, a Universalist church. And so we actually had summer meetings out there then for a number of summers, and to gather all Unitarian Universalists, people who were interested from around that area, to join us for summer services. And it was just an interesting offshoot of things that turn up that you can enjoy and enlarge on. And so Mom and I worked together on quite a lot of them. He was active in the church too, but not as much in office. See, one of the things. Oh, so I guess I wanted to finish about this. Okay, here we are at the end of the year, that we all year long had different things to celebrate our 75 years. And we decided that we would end with, well, we had a dinner, an evening dinner. And then we cleared the floor in the auditorium and had a ball. So I think it's the last ball we've had at the church. I think it's time for another one, maybe. We should have some kind of dancing going on. So that pretty well brings a lot of stuff together. Oh, I did want to mention about Hester Jeffrey. Here she is. Okay. So I was very pleased to discover Hester Jeffrey as having been this wonderful character that nobody seemed to remember about, who was a member of our church and of AME Zion, and who did a whole career of weaving together the black and the white, particularly women's organizations. And she did this not only in our family, our town, but all across the country. And it was a very unusual thing to do, and this happened all during the 1890s when so many organizations were being formed, and they were being formed exclusively to be for white. So she had she had a wonderful influence, and I was very pleased to discover her, and that she was a member of our church and AME Zion. And of course, she's the one who erected the beautiful stained glass window in AME Zion of Susan B. Anthony. So all kind of things pop up if you're a historian. You never know what you're going to find and what it's going to lead to. And so it's been a wonderful pleasure of my life to serve that way, as well as I was on the board for a set of years and one thing and another. But this church has been, I couldn't have asked for more. I never could. And thank you.
Okay.
So if any